A fragile piece. The serene countryside seemed like a world away from the chaos they had endured. Alice watched Gerald as he stood on their modest porch, gazing out at the rolling fields with a distant expression. She had hoped the fresh air and quiet life in the province would soothe the man she loved, but it was clear his mind was restless. Gerald had left the dangerous world of espionage behind, but the shadows of his past clung to him like a second skin. Every creak of a floorboard, every passing stranger, seemed to set him on edge. Alice, ever patient and supportive, tried her best to ease his transition into civilian life. "You'll get used to it," she said with a warm smile as she handed him a cup of coffee. "It just takes time." Gerald nodded, forcing a small smile in return, but the weight of his thoughts was evident. "Time doesn't erase everything, Alice." As they shared a quiet breakfast, a faint unease lingered in the air. Unbeknownst to them, a pair of watchful eyes observed their every move from a distance. Hidden among the shadows of the nearby forest, a figure lingered, silent, calculating, and all too familiar with Gerald's former life. The day unfolded with a semblance of normalcy. Alice busied herself preparing her lesson plans for a small local school where she had volunteered to teach. Gerald tried his hand at repairing the fence, a simple task that felt foreign in his roughened hands. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, the tranquility was interrupted by the faint sound of an approaching motorbike. Gerald's instincts kicked in, his body tense as he stepped onto the porch. The rider passed by without stopping, but not without casting a lingering glance at their home. Inside, Alice noticed his unease. "Is something wrong?" she asked, concern etched on her face. Gerald hesitated before shaking his head. "Nothing. Just being careful." But deep down, Gerald knew better. Peace was a fragile thing, and in his line of work, it rarely lasted long. As the night deepened, he couldn't shake the feeling that their quiet life was already under threat. Somewhere in the darkness, the mysterious figure smiled. Gerald's escape was temporary. The shadows of his past were drawing closer, and this time, they wouldn't be ignored. The past resurfaces. The morning started like any other, Alice preparing breakfast while Gerald tended to their small garden. Yet, an unexpected knock on the door shattered the fragile illusion of normalcy. When Gerald opened it, he froze. Standing there was Marcus, an old colleague from his days as a government agent. Dressed casually, Marcus still carried an air of authority and urgency. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his voice low. Reluctantly, Gerald stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Alice, curious but respecting his space, watched from the kitchen window, noticing the tension etched on Gerald's face as they spoke. Marcus explained the reason for his sudden appearance. Remnants of Randolph's syndicate had regrouped, forming a new organization that was quickly gaining power. This syndicate had expanded its operations. Human trafficking, drug smuggling, and illegal arms trade were just the beginning. The government suspected the group was responsible for a recent string of violent incidents in the region. "I'm out, Marcus," Gerald said firmly. "I left that life behind." Marcus sighed. "I know. But we need someone who understands how these people operate, someone who can get close without raising suspicion. Randolph's men were after you before, and they know you're still a threat. Whether you like it or not, you're already involved." Gerald clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. The thought of diving back into that world filled him with dread, not for himself, but for Alice. He had promised her peace, a life free from danger. Inside the house, Alice sensed something was wrong. When Gerald returned, his expression was clouded, his usual calm replaced by inner turmoil. "Who was that?" Alice asked, setting down the coffee she had been holding. "Just an old friend," Gerald replied, avoiding her gaze. Alice stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "You're not telling me everything." Gerald sighed, debating whether to confide in her. "It's nothing to worry about. Just someone from my past, asking for a favor I can't give." But Alice knew him too well. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the way his shoulders carried a weight she thought they had left behind. "Gerald," she said softly, "whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. I'm here." Her words comforted him, but they also deepened his guilt. He had worked so hard to shield her from his dangerous past, yet now it threatened to pull him back in. That evening, as Alice prepared for bed, Gerald stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. Marcus's words echoed in his mind, "You're already involved." He glanced at Alice, peacefully asleep, and made a silent vow. If he had to step back into the shadows, he would do it to protect her and ensure their fragile peace remained intact. But he couldn't shake the fear that by doing so, he might lose her forever. Alice in the Crossfire. Alice had always believed the province would be a safe haven. The school where she taught was her sanctuary, filled with the laughter and curiosity of children eager to learn. But that peace was shattered on a seemingly ordinary day. As Alice walked to her classroom, she noticed a sleek black car idling near the school gates. The windows were tinted, and the driver's face was obscured. A faint unease settled in her chest, but she brushed it off, focusing on her students. The day took a darker turn when, during her lunch break, a commotion erupted outside. The car had returned, and two men stepped out, their sharp gazes scanning the area. One of her colleagues hurried in, pale-faced. "Alice," she whispered urgently. "There are men outside asking about you." Alice's heart raced as she glanced toward the window. Her instinct told her to hide, but she knew she couldn't leave the students alone. Steeling herself, she walked out to meet the men. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. One of the men, tall and imposing, smirked. "You're Alice, right? We've got a message for your friend Gerald." Before she could respond, the man handed her a sealed envelope and leaned in closer. "Tell him we'll be watching." The cryptic message left her shaken, but the nightmare wasn't over. That evening, as Alice walked home, she felt someone following her. Panic set in when she saw a shadow move closer, and she quickened her pace. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm. She spun around, her fear turning to relief as she saw Gerald. His eyes were sharp, his grip firm but comforting. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning the street behind her. Alice nodded, too stunned to speak. Gerald escorted her home, his protective demeanor unyielding. Once inside, Alice showed him the envelope. Gerald's face darkened as he read the note inside, "Stay out of this, or we'll finish what we started." The note wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. "They know where you are," Alice said, her voice trembling. "They're watching us, aren't they?" Gerald nodded grimly. "They've been watching for a while. I should have seen this coming." Alice's eyes filled with worry. "Why didn't you tell me? I deserve to know the truth." Gerald took her hands, his voice low and steady. "Because I didn't want this life touching you. But now, I don't have a choice. I'll protect you, Alice. No matter what it takes." That night, Gerald began making preparations. His peaceful facade was gone, replaced by the focused and determined agent he had once been. Alice watched him in silence, her heart heavy. The next day, the school was eerily quiet. News had spread of the men who had come looking for Alice, and many parents chose to keep their children home. As Gerald left the house, armed with the knowledge of the syndicate's reach, Alice stood at the doorway. "Gerald," she called, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "Come back to me." He turned, giving her a small but resolute smile. "Always." But deep down, they both knew the stakes. Gerald wasn't just fighting for justice anymore, he was fighting for the woman he loved, even if it meant stepping back into the darkness he had tried so hard to escape. A new villain in a sleek, dimly lit office overlooking the bustling streets of Manila, Selena Villarreal sat behind a massive mahogany desk. Her sharp features and cold eyes betrayed her beauty, exuding an aura of authority and danger. A holographic projection of Gerald's profile hovered in front of her, a grim reminder of her burning vendetta. "He took everything from me," Selena murmured, her voice barely audible yet laced with venom. Selena was not just the leader of the syndicate, she was its mastermind, a woman who had climbed to the top of the criminal underworld through cunning, brutality, and an unyielding resolve. Years ago, during one of Gerald's covert missions, she had lost her younger brother, Mateo, a skilled hacker and Selena's closest confidant. The mission, which had dismantled a major smuggling ring, left Matteo dead, and Selina swore vengeance. Her assistant, a wiry man named Lucio, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, we've located Gerald's hideout. He's with a woman, Alice. A schoolteacher." Selina leaned back in her chair, her lips curling into a sinister smile. "A schoolteacher? How quaint. It seems our dear agent has a weakness after all." Lucio continued, "She seems unaware of his true identity, but their relationship is close." Selina's smile faded, replaced by a steely determination. "If Gerald cares for her, then she's the key to breaking him. Prepare a message for him. Something he can't ignore." Lucio nodded and left the room, leaving Selina to her thoughts. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the city below. For years, she had been patient, rebuilding her network and strengthening her influence. Now, with Gerald back in the game, her plan could finally come to fruition. "Gerald," she whispered to herself, her voice icy. "You thought you could escape, but this time, you won't just lose your mission, you'll lose everything." Meanwhile, Gerald was piecing together the syndicate's activities. He had heard whispers of Selina's name before but had no idea she was the one pulling the strings. He worked late into the night, poring over files and surveillance photos in his small makeshift office. Alice, sensing his tension, brought him a cup of coffee. "You've been at this for hours. Maybe you should rest." Gerald looked up, his eyes softening as he saw her concern. "I can't afford to rest, Alice. Not when you're in danger." Alice sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you, no matter what." Gerald hesitated. The last thing he wanted was for Alice to get further involved, but her strength and determination were undeniable. The calm of the evening was shattered when Gerald's phone buzzed. A message had come through: "Meet me at the abandoned docks at midnight. Come alone, or she pays the price." Attached was a photo of one of Alice's students, bound and gagged. Gerald clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He recognized the docks, it was a trap, but he couldn't ignore it. "Gerald?" Alice asked, noticing the change in his expression. "It's Selina," he said quietly. "She's making her move." Alice's face paled. "What are you going to do?" Gerald stood, his resolve hardening. "I'll handle it. Stay here and keep the doors locked." But as he left, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change forever. At the docks, Selina waited, dressed in a sleek black suit that reflected her power. Her men stood at attention, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. She held her phone in one hand, watching Gerald approach through the shadows. "Gerald," she greeted with a mocking smile. "It's been a long time." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "Selina. I should have known you were behind this." "You always were the smart one," Selina replied, circling him like a predator sizing up its prey. "Tell me, how does it feel to be on the losing side for once?" "I'm not here to play games," Gerald said firmly. "Let the kid go." Selina laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Oh, Gerald, this isn't about the child. It's about you. And her." She held up a tablet displaying a live feed of Alice at home, unaware she was being watched. Gerald's heart sank. Selina had anticipated his every move. "This is only the beginning," Selina whispered. "You'll lose her, just like I lost him. And you'll know what it feels like to have everything you love taken away." As Gerald prepared to act, Selina's men closed in. The game of cat and mouse had begun, and Gerald knew that the stakes had never been higher. The return to action. Gerald paced the small living room, his fists clenched as he stared at the agency's official dossier spread across the table. The words on the page were a stark reminder of the life he'd tried to leave behind: Selina Villarreal. Syndicate leader. Target, high priority. "Gerald, you don't have to do this," Alice said softly, standing at the doorway. He turned to her, his expression conflicted. "I do. Selina won't stop until she destroys everything I care about." I can't let her hurt you or anyone else. The decision had already been made, but it wasn't without its burdens. Hours earlier, Gerald had received a visit from his former handler, Special Agent Reyes. She had laid out the severity of Selina's operations and how Gerald's inside knowledge made him the best chance of dismantling her empire. You know, this isn't just about you anymore, Reyes had said. Selina's syndicate is growing. If we don't act now, countless lives will be at risk. Reluctantly, Gerald had agreed, with one condition: he would protect Alice at all costs. Alice, however, wasn't content to be a bystander. You can't keep shutting me out, she insisted, stepping closer to him. If I'm going to be in danger anyway, I'd rather know what's happening. Gerald hesitated. The thought of Alice being anywhere near this operation made his chest tighten. But as he looked into her determined eyes, he realized there was no changing her mind. Fine, he said finally. But you follow my lead. No risks, no heroics. Alice nodded, relief washing over her. We're in this together. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Gerald reconnected with his old agency, briefing them on Selina's tactics and gathering intel on her operations. Alice found herself immersed in a world she had only seen in movies: hidden comms, encrypted files, and covert strategies. Though out of her depth, Alice quickly proved her resourcefulness. She used her connections as a teacher to gather information on local community activities that could be linked to Selina's operations. Her charm and empathy made people open up to her, providing leads that even the agency hadn't uncovered. I didn't know I was dating a detective, Gerald joked one evening as they sifted through the information she had gathered. Alice smirked. And I didn't know I was dating a secret agent. Guess we're both full of surprises. The mission escalated when Reyes called Gerald in for a classified meeting. Selina's next move had been identified: a shipment of illegal weapons was set to arrive at a private dock, funded through shell corporations. We need to intercept that shipment, Reyes said, her tone serious. But Selina's network is extensive. This won't be a clean operation. Gerald nodded, but his mind was already racing. The mission was dangerous, and he knew Selina would anticipate their moves. As he prepared to leave, Alice stopped him. You're not doing this alone. Gerald shook his head. It's too dangerous. I'm already in danger, Gerald, she countered. Let me help. Her unwavering resolve left him with no choice. Together, they devised a plan. Alice would stay in the safe zone but act as an undercover observer, relaying information to the team. The night of the operation arrived. Gerald, clad in tactical gear, led the agency's team to the docks. Alice, stationed nearby with a hidden transmitter, monitored the situation from a distance. The mission began smoothly as the team moved in to intercept the shipment. But Selina, always one step ahead, had laid a trap. Explosions rocked the dock, throwing the team into chaos. Through the comms, Alice's voice broke through. Gerald. It's an ambush. Dodging gunfire, Gerald led his team to regroup, his training kicking in. But his focus faltered when he heard Selina's voice over the comms. Hello, Agent Rivera, Selina taunted. Enjoying my little surprise? Gerald's jaw tightened. This ends tonight, Selina. Oh, I don't think so, she replied, her voice dripping with malice. You see, I always have the upper hand. As the firefight intensified, Gerald knew this was only the beginning. Selina's web of power stretched farther than he had imagined, and now, with Alice involved, the stakes were higher than ever. Back at their safe house after the mission, Gerald and Alice sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them. I didn't realize it would be like this, Alice admitted, her voice trembling. Gerald took her hand, his expression softening. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Alice met his gaze, her determination returning. And I'll do whatever it takes to keep us together. Despite the danger, their bond had only grown stronger. But as Selina's voice echoed in Gerald's mind, he knew the battle was far from over. Trust tested. The weight of secrets hung heavy in the air between Gerald and Alice, and the tension only grew after Selina began her campaign of manipulation. Alice found herself haunted by questions she didn't know how to ask, and Gerald's growing silence only made things worse. One afternoon, while Alice was organizing her classroom after school, an unexpected visitor arrived. Selina, dressed in an elegant but intimidating outfit, stepped inside with a sly smile. "Miss Alice," Selina purred, her voice dripping with charm. "I've heard so much about you." Alice froze, her instincts telling her to stay calm. "Who are you?" "Just someone concerned about your safety," Selina said, stepping closer. "Do you really know the man you've tied your life to? Or are you blind to the skeletons in his closet?" Alice's heart pounded as Selina handed her a file. "Go ahead. Open it. See the truth for yourself." That night, Alice sat alone at the dining table, staring at the unopened file. Gerald returned home, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "You're home late," she said, her voice tighter than she intended. "Long day," Gerald replied, avoiding her gaze as he set his keys on the counter. The silence between them was unbearable. Finally, Alice couldn't take it anymore. She held up the file. "What is this, Gerald? What aren't you telling me?" His face darkened as he recognized the emblem on the folder. "Where did you get that?" "That's not the point," Alice shot back. "The point is that someone cheat gave this to me. And now I'm wondering if I even know who you are." Reluctantly, Gerald sat down and began to explain his past. He spoke of the missions he had undertaken, the lives he had saved, but also the hard decisions he had made, the ones that haunted him. "I've done things I'm not proud of," Gerald admitted. "But everything I did was for the greater good. To stop people like Selina." Alice listened, her heart torn between understanding and doubt. The man she loved had a side to him she'd never seen, a shadowy world she didn't know how to reconcile. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked quietly. "I wanted to protect you," Gerald said, his voice heavy with regret. "The less you knew, the safer you were." Alice stood, the file still in her hand. "I don't know if I can handle this, Gerald. I don't know if I can handle you." Selina's plan was working. Over the following days, Alice couldn't shake the images and information from the file. Witness accounts painted Gerald as a cold and ruthless agent who did whatever it took to accomplish his mission. The man she knew as loving and protective seemed like a stranger. Meanwhile, Gerald was battling his own demons. He noticed the distance growing between him and Alice, but every time he tried to bridge the gap, she pulled further away. At the same time, Selina continued to stoke the flames. She sent Alice cryptic messages, hinting at more secrets Gerald hadn't shared. "Do you really think he's told you everything?" one message read. The breaking point came one evening when Alice confronted Gerald again. "Selina's right about you, isn't she?" Alice said, her voice trembling. "You've kept more from me than you're admitting." Gerald's temper flared. "You're letting her get into your head. Don't you see what she's doing? She's trying to break us apart." "And maybe she's succeeding," Alice shot back, tears in her eyes. "Because I don't know who to trust anymore." Gerald reached out for her, but she stepped away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Later that night, Gerald sat alone in the dark, replaying their argument in his mind. He knew he couldn't lose Alice, not to Selina, not to his past, not to his own mistakes. Alice, in the privacy of their bedroom, stared at her reflection in the mirror, questioning everything she thought she knew. The cracks in their relationship had deepened, and Selina's shadow loomed larger than ever. Trust was fragile, and both Alice and Gerald would need to decide whether to fight for their love or let it crumble under the weight of secrets and lies. Selina's trap. The air was thick with tension as Gerald prepared for what he knew was a dangerous operation. Selina had baited him with intel too enticing to ignore coordinates of a critical shipment that could cripple her syndicate. Yet, deep down, he felt the nagging pull of a trap. "I have to do this alone," Gerald said firmly, looking into Alice's concerned eyes. Despite the tension between them, he couldn't risk her safety. "Then don't go at all," Alice pleaded, her voice trembling. "This isn't just about you, Gerald. Don't you see how much you're risking?" Gerald shook his head, his expression resolute. If I don't act, Selina will keep coming for us. I can't let that happen. As Gerald disappeared into the night, Alice couldn't suppress the gnawing fear in her chest. Her trust in him had been shaken, but her love remained unyielding. Determined not to lose him, she decided to follow, ignoring his warnings. With nothing but her intuition and a rough idea of Gerald's destination, Alice tailed him at a safe distance. She knew it was reckless, but her resolve was stronger than her fear. The coordinates led Gerald to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The setting was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of rusted metal in the wind. Armed and focused, Gerald entered cautiously, scanning for signs of Selina's men. Unbeknownst to him, Alice had parked her car a few blocks away and crept toward the warehouse. As she neared, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. Inside, Gerald found what he had suspected: an empty shipment container and a single envelope with his name on it. He opened it to find a taunting note in Selina's elegant handwriting: "You're predictable, Gerald. Did you think it would be this easy? Checkmate." Before Gerald could react, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the warehouse. A dozen armed men emerged from the shadows, guns trained on him. Alice, peering through a cracked window, saw Gerald surrounded and gasped. She clutched her phone, debating whether to call for help, but before she could act, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. "Looks like we have an uninvited guest," a cold voice hissed. Alice struggled, but the grip was too strong. Dragged into the warehouse, Alice was thrown into the open, landing near Gerald. His eyes widened in horror as he saw her there, disheveled but defiant. "Alice," Gerald breathed, his voice filled with a mix of anger and despair. "Why did you follow me?" "I couldn't let you do this alone," she said, her voice trembling but steady. Selina's laugh rang out as she stepped into the light, dressed in a sleek black ensemble that oozed power and menace. "How touching," Selina mocked. The damsel couldn't stay away. "It's almost poetic, really." Gerald's jaw tightened as he glared at Selina. "Let her go. This is between you and me." Selina smirked, circling them like a predator savoring its prey. "Oh, Gerald. You still think you're in control. How quaint." She motioned to her men, who grabbed Alice and restrained her. Gerald lunged forward, but the cocking of a gun stopped him in his tracks. Selina leaned in close, her voice a whisper dripping with malice. "You took someone from me, Gerald. Now I'll take someone from you. Let's see how strong your resolve is when the person you love is on the line." As Gerald stood frozen, his mind raced. He had to find a way to save Alice, but the odds were stacked against him. Selina's trap had worked perfectly, and now, both he and Alice were at her mercy. The stakes had never been higher. With Alice's life hanging in the balance, Gerald would have to outwit Selina, not just to escape, but to finally end the cycle of danger that had consumed their lives. The trap had been set, and Gerald would need every ounce of his skill and cunning to turn the tables. But Selina had underestimated one thing: the lengths he would go to protect the woman he loved. A dangerous bargain. The dimly lit room smelled of rust and gasoline. Alice sat bound to a chair, her wrists chafed from the coarse rope. Though fear coursed through her, she forced herself to remain calm. She had always been resourceful, and now her life and Gerald's depended on her wits. Across the room, Selina paced with predatory grace, her cold eyes fixed on Alice. "You're braver than I expected," Selina mused. "Most people would be crying by now." Alice met Selina's gaze, her voice steady despite her fear. "What do you want from me? This isn't about me, is it?" Selina's lips curled into a smirk. "You're right. This is about Gerald and what he's willing to sacrifice for you." Meanwhile, in a secluded location a few miles away, Gerald stood face to face with Selina's second-in-command, a scarred and imposing man named Victor. He held a phone in his hand, the speaker crackling as Selina's voice came through. "Gerald, darling," Selina purred. "I have a proposition for you. Surrender yourself to me, and I'll let Alice go. Refuse, and..." Her voice trailed off, leaving the threat hanging in the air. "You know I can't trust you," Gerald said, his voice cold and controlled. Selina chuckled. You're right not to. But what choice do you have? If you don't act soon, I might get bored and decide she's no longer useful. Back at the hideout, Alice had been subtly loosening her bonds while Selina's attention was elsewhere. Her fingers bled from the effort, but she didn't stop. Selina noticed Alice's determined expression and laughed. Planning something, are we? I admire your spirit, but let me remind you, this isn't a game you can win. Alice decided to play along, keeping Selina talking. If you're so confident, why not let me go? You've already got Gerald exactly where you want him. Selina's smile faltered for a moment, then returned. Ah, the art of manipulation. You're clever, but not clever enough. Gerald will come for you, and when he does, I'll have everything I need to destroy him. Gerald, torn between his love for Alice and his duty to take down Selina's syndicate, consulted his old agency. They urged him to stay focused on the mission, arguing that surrendering would compromise years of work. You don't understand, Gerald snapped. This isn't just a mission to me. Alice's life is on the line. His mentor, Agent Harris, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. You can't let emotions cloud your judgment. If you go to her now, you'll walk into Selina's trap. There's a better way. As Gerald struggled with his decision, Alice finally freed her hands and began working on the ropes around her ankles. Selina, distracted by a phone call from Victor, didn't notice. Alice spotted a sharp piece of metal on the floor and tucked it into her hand, ready to act if an opportunity arose. Selina ended her call and turned back to Alice. Time's up. Let's see how far Gerald is willing to go for you. Just then, Selina's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and smiled. Ah, speak of the devil. Gerald had made his decision. He would go to Selina but on his terms. Armed with a carefully devised plan and the backing of his old agency, he prepared for what would be the most dangerous operation of his life. As Selina's voice came through the phone, taunting him, Gerald remained calm. I'll come. But if you hurt her, there won't be a place on this earth where you can hide. Selina's laugh echoed through the line. I look forward to seeing you, Gerald. Let's make it a night to remember. With the clock ticking, Gerald set out, knowing that this time, the stakes were higher than ever. For Alice, for justice, and for his own redemption, he would face whatever lay ahead. Allies in the shadows. The faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed in the stark confines of the prison visitation room. Gerald sat rigid, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as he waited for the guards to bring Randolph. His heart churned with unease. The thought of turning to his old adversary for help was a bitter pill to swallow, but he had no other choice. The door opened with a metallic clang, and Randolph entered, shackled but carrying himself with his usual air of arrogance. His sharp eyes immediately locked onto Gerald, and a smirk played on his lips. Well, Randolph drawled, taking a seat across from Gerald. If it isn't the great secret agent himself. To what do I owe the honor? Gerald leaned forward, his voice low and firm. I need information on Selina. You know her operations better than anyone. Randolph raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. Selina? Haven't heard that name in a while. Last I checked, she was your problem, not mine. Don't play games, Gerald snapped. I know you still have connections to the syndicate. If you help me, you'll get something you want in return, revenge. Randolph's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of genuine interest. Revenge, you say? And here I thought you were too noble for such dirty motives. As the tension thickened, Randolph leaned back in his chair, studying Gerald. You must be desperate to come to me, of all people. What's Selina done to rattle you so badly? Gerald hesitated, then spoke. She has Alice. Randolph's smirk returned, whiter this time. Ah, the schoolteacher. So that's what this is about. You've gone soft, Gerald. Risking everything for love? How? Romantic. Gerald's eyes darkened. Say what you want. Just tell me what you know. Randolph tapped his fingers on the table, considering his options. Selina and I, let's just say we had our disagreements. She took something from me, someone I cared about. You want her? I'll give you what you need. But understand this, I'm not doing it for you. Over the next hour, Randolph detailed Selina's operations, revealing locations of safehouses, key players, and her most guarded secrets. As he spoke, Gerald felt a strange mix of gratitude and resentment. He couldn't ignore the fact that Randolph's intel might save Alice, but working with him also meant revisiting the ghosts of his past. Before leaving, Gerald stood and fixed Randolph with a steely gaze. If you're lying, or if this is some kind of trap. Randolph interrupted with a dry laugh. Relax, Gerald. I want Selina gone as much as you do. Just promise me one thing: when you take her down, let her know it was me who helped. Later that night, Gerald shared the intel with his agency. The information was solid, and plans were quickly set in motion. But as Gerald prepared for the mission, he couldn't shake the lingering doubt. Alice's life hung in the balance, and he was relying on a man who had once tried to destroy him. Yet beneath Randolph's smug demeanor, Gerald sensed something genuine, a shared hatred for Selina that transcended their enmity. As the team finalized their strategy, Gerald thought of Alice. He could still hear her laugh, still see the light in her eyes. She had to survive this. No matter the cost, he would bring her back. For now, he would keep Randolph's motives in the back of his mind. Allies in the shadows weren't always trustworthy, but they were often necessary. A battle of wits. The cold, damp walls of Selina's hideout pressed in around Alice as she paced back and forth in her cramped cell. Her heart raced, adrenaline still coursing through her veins after her narrow escape earlier that day. But she knew better than to celebrate. Selina was no ordinary villain, she was a master of manipulation, and Alice was playing a dangerous game of cat and mouse. A sharp click echoed through the silence as the door to her cell opened, and Selina stepped in, a devilish smile curling on her lips. Well, Selina purred, her voice laced with amusement. It seems you're not as helpless as I thought, Alice. I must admit, I'm impressed. Alice straightened her back, refusing to show fear. You won't win, Selina. Gerald will find me. Selina laughed softly, her eyes glinting with something darker. Oh, darling, don't be so naive. Do you really think he can save you? Do you even know who he truly is? Alice's stomach twisted. She'd seen the cracks in Gerald's facade before, the shadows from his past that haunted him. But hearing the words from Selina's lips felt like a sharp slap to the face. What do you mean? Alice asked, her voice betraying a mix of confusion and suspicion. Selina leaned closer, her smile widening. Gerald is not the man you think he is. He's been playing you from the start. Did you know that he's been responsible for the deaths of countless innocents? That his hands are stained with blood, much like mine? Alice recoiled, trying to keep the flood of emotions at bay. She had always known that Gerald was involved in dangerous work, but this? This was something else. Stop lying. Alice snapped, her heart pounding in her chest. Oh, but I'm not lying, Alice, Selina countered, her voice cold and calculating. I know you've seen the darkness in him. That cold, detached look when he's on a mission. He's killed for the government, for people like me. And he's let you fall in love with a lie. Alice's breath hitched, her mind spinning. She didn't want to believe it. She couldn't. But Selina's words rang with a chilling truth. Gerald had never fully opened up about his past. Could he really have done such things? Before Alice could say anything more, Selina's smirk faded, and she turned to leave. Think about it, Alice. You're nothing more than a pawn in Gerald's game. The question is, when will you realize it? As the door slammed shut behind her, Alice sank to her knees, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and pain. The thought of losing Gerald to his past, of learning the horrifying truth about his deeds, gnawed at her. Was it even possible to love someone so broken? Her heart ached as she thought of the man she had fallen for, charming, loving, but now. Could he really have been hiding such a monstrous side to him? The question gnawed at her with increasing intensity. But before she could delve deeper into her thoughts, the sound of footsteps caught her attention. Her pulse quickened. Gerald was coming for her. She had to hold on to that hope. But she couldn't escape the gnawing fear that his past would come to light in a way she might not be ready to handle. Meanwhile, Gerald was a man on a mission. He knew time was running out. Alice's life was at stake, and every second counted. But as he sat in the safe house, looking over Randolph's information, something in his gut told him that it wasn't just Selina he needed to worry about. Randolph had warned him, Selina was ruthless, and she would stop at nothing to get under Alice's skin. But Gerald knew Alice, he had seen her strength. And despite everything, he was certain she could endure. Yet he couldn't ignore the fear rising in his chest. What if he couldn't save her in time? What if the truth of his past, everything he had tried to bury, was exposed? Could Alice still love him if she learned of the atrocities he had been part of? No, he couldn't allow those thoughts to paralyze him. Alice was still alive, still waiting for him. That was all that mattered. He gathered his team and set the plan into motion. Using the intel from Randolph, he'd track Selina's movements and orchestrate a daring rescue. But this time, he wouldn't be making the same mistakes. He had to protect Alice, not just from Selina, but from the painful truth of his past. As the team geared up, Gerald glanced at his phone. He could only pray that Alice hadn't fallen too far into Selina's mind games. He couldn't let her doubt him, not now. This battle wasn't just against Selina. It was against the past that haunted him, the secrets that threatened to destroy everything he had built with Alice. And he would win. No matter the cost. The final showdown. The night was thick with tension, the air electric with the impending clash between Gerald and the syndicate. They were on the edge of their final confrontation, the kind of battle that would decide everything. Alice had been captured, taken to Selina's stronghold, and the weight of that knowledge pressed heavily on Gerald's chest. The fear of losing her, of failing her, burned like a constant ache deep in his gut. But tonight, he would make it right. He had to. The stronghold loomed in front of them, an imposing fortress of steel and concrete, tucked away in the heart of the city. Selina's empire had thrived here, hidden in plain sight, and this would be the place where it all came crashing down. Gerald stood in the shadows, his team positioned around the perimeter. He wasn't here just for Alice. He wasn't here just for revenge against Selina. No, this was about redemption. This was about proving to himself that he could be the man Alice deserved. Inside, the air was thick with dread as Alice paced back and forth in her cell. She had been chained to the wall for what felt like an eternity, her mind racing through every possible scenario. But she wasn't going to wait passively for rescue. She wouldn't be another helpless pawn in Selina's twisted game. Her thoughts flashed to Gerald. She knew how much he was struggling with his past, how haunted he was by the things he had done. But despite everything, despite the darkness he carried with him, she loved him. And now, she would help him face that darkness head-on. A sudden noise broke her thoughts, footsteps, slow and deliberate. She didn't need to look to know it was Selina. "Are you ready to give up yet, Alice?" Selina's voice came from behind her, smooth and deadly. "You think you can survive this? You think Gerald will come for you?" Alice turned slowly, her face a mask of calm defiance. "You're wrong about him. And you're wrong about me. He's coming. And you're going to lose." Selina's lips twisted into a smirk. "You still believe in him, don't you? After everything he's done? He's not the man you think he is. He's a killer, Alice. He's always been." Alice's pulse quickened, but she didn't falter. "I know him. I know the man he's trying to be. You're the one who doesn't understand. You're just a puppet pulling strings, manipulating people, trying to control everything." Selina's eyes narrowed, her gaze growing darker. "You don't know what it's like to lose everything, to have the ones you love taken from you. You think you can save him? You think you're enough?" Alice's heart pounded in her chest as she stood tall, defying the fear threatening to overtake her. "I don't have to save him. He's already saved himself." And now, I'm going to save us both. Outside, Gerald made his move. His team had infiltrated the compound under the cover of darkness, and now, it was time for the final assault. Selina wouldn't know what hit her. He crept through the corridors, silent and methodical, his heart beating only for Alice. As he reached the control room, he signaled to his team to move in. They had to disable the security systems, no surprises, no distractions. But as he moved deeper into the stronghold, he began to feel the weight of his past settling on him once more. The mistakes, the bloodshed, the people he had hurt, it all rushed back, and for a brief moment, doubt crept in. But then, he thought of Alice. Her strength. Her unwavering belief in him. She was counting on him. Inside the stronghold, Selina was waiting. She had known Gerald would come, and she had prepared for it. But what she didn't expect was Alice. In a daring move, Alice had used the limited resources available to her, her intelligence, her cunning, to break free from her restraints. She had found a hidden keycard left carelessly by one of Selina's guards. And now, with the element of surprise on her side, she was ready to make her move. She moved swiftly, using the shadows to her advantage, staying one step ahead of Selina's ever-watchful eyes. Her heart raced, but her mind was clear. She had a mission: get to Gerald, help him, and bring Selina down once and for all. When Gerald and his team finally reached the central chamber, they were met with a sight that nearly froze his blood. Selina stood in front of Alice, a cruel smile on her face. "Do you really think you can outsmart me?" Selina taunted, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You're too weak. Both of you." But before she could make her next move, Alice, with the strength and courage that had kept her alive all these months, lunged at Selina. The distraction was enough to give Gerald the opening he needed. He charged forward, tackling Selina to the ground in a blur of motion. The two enemies struggled, their hands locked in a brutal fight for control. Gerald's fists connected with Selina's face, each blow fueled by years of pent-up guilt, rage, and the need to protect Alice. But Selina wasn't finished yet. She fought back with the venom of a wounded animal, clawing at Gerald's chest, her nails leaving deep gashes in his skin. "Alice, get out of here!" Gerald shouted, his voice strained with urgency. "Now!" Alice hesitated for a moment, but then, without a second thought, she ran toward the exit, the sounds of the struggle fading as she moved through the compound. Gerald's fight with Selina continued, each second feeling like an eternity. But as the seconds ticked by, he began to see a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something greater. And as Selina finally collapsed under the weight of his relentless assault, he knew it was over. Later, as the dust settled and Selina was taken into custody, Gerald found Alice waiting for him outside, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You did it," she whispered, her voice soft with admiration and love. Gerald smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "We did it, Alice. Together." But the victory came at a heavy cost. Selina's downfall was only the beginning. The consequences of their actions would ripple through their lives for years to come. The battle had been won, but the war? That was still to come. A costly victory. The air was thick with the scent of burnt rubber and acrid smoke as the sun began to rise over the wreckage of Selina's compound. The sounds of sirens and the hurried footsteps of law enforcement filled the air, signaling the end of the intense operation. But for Gerald and Alice, the victory felt bittersweet. Gerald's body was a canvas of bruises and cuts, his clothes torn from the fight. His face, though bloodied, still held a fierce determination. But beneath the surface, there was a weariness and exhaustion that had nothing to do with the physical battle and everything to do with the emotional toll of their journey. Alice stood beside him, her hand gripping as tightly as the paramedics worked on him, applying pressure to a gash on his side. Her eyes were filled with concern, but there was something deeper there, an unspoken weight that neither of them could avoid any longer. "Gerald," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you need to rest. You're hurt." He forced a small smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, Alice. It's nothing." But she could see the pain in his eyes, the toll that months of running, hiding, and fighting had taken on him. She wanted to argue, to insist that he take care of himself, but she knew him too well. She knew that for him, the fight would never be over, not until he had done everything he could to keep her safe. "We're done now," Alice said softly, her fingers gently brushing against his. "You don't have to keep doing this. We can leave it all behind, together. We've won. Selena's gone. The syndicate's done." Gerald's gaze flickered to her, and for a moment, he seemed to falter. His hand tightened around hers, but there was something in his eyes that made her heart tighten in return. "I don't know if we can ever leave it behind, Alice," he replied, his voice low. "This life. It's always there, lurking in the shadows. Even when we think we're safe, there's always another danger waiting." Alice felt her stomach tighten at the unspoken truth in his words. She had seen it, how the past never fully let go, how the consequences of their choices stretched far beyond their control. But she refused to let fear consume her, not now. Not after everything they had been through together. "We faced the worst, Gerald," she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her heart. "And we've come out on top. Whatever's next, we'll face it together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." He looked at her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he let himself truly see her, see the strength and the love that had kept them both afloat. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For keeping you in the dark, for dragging you into this. I should have protected you." Alice shook her head, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. "You've always protected me, Gerald. You just didn't know how to let me protect you in return." The weight of his past, the years of being a secret agent, of making impossible choices, hung heavily in the air. He had always kept his distance, always thought he was unworthy of her love, unworthy of her trust. But now, after all they had been through, Alice wasn't going to let him push her away. The paramedics finished their work, bandaging Gerald's wounds and giving him a few moments to rest. He was exhausted, but the drive to keep moving, to fix everything, never fully left him. They were alive, and that alone was a victory, but it didn't feel like enough. "I don't know what's next for us," Gerald said quietly, his eyes closing as he leaned against the ambulance. "But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep putting you in danger." Alice knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Then we'll find a new path. Together." Gerald's lips twitched into a tired smile, the weight of the world still on his shoulders but lightened by her presence. Together. The mission had been a success, and Selena was gone, but the road ahead would not be easy. Both Gerald and Alice knew that. The shadows of their past would always be there, haunting them, reminding them of what they had done and what they had lost. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't facing it alone. Alice took his hand, squeezing it tightly as the paramedics helped him to his feet. "Let's go home, Gerald. Let's find some peace." It was a fragile peace, but it was theirs. And for the first time, that was enough. The world would always be filled with danger, with uncertainty, and with shadows from the past. But as long as they had each other, they knew they could face whatever came next. Together. Randolph's redemption. The quiet hum of the morning air was broken only by the soft rustling of leaves outside Alice's window. The sun had just begun to rise, casting long shadows across the room as Alice sat in the living room, her mind still racing from the events of the past few days. The danger was gone, Selena's reign of terror had been brought to an end, and they were free to begin healing, but it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a new chapter, one that brought its own challenges. Gerald sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, offering the comfort she so desperately needed. Despite his physical wounds slowly healing, the emotional scars they both carried were far from fading. The quiet peace between them was a rare comfort, a fleeting moment of normalcy in a world that had never allowed them to fully exhale. The doorbell rang, snapping Alice out of her thoughts. She glanced at Gerald, who gave her a silent nod, signaling that he would get it. She watched him get up, his movements still slow and deliberate, the effects of the mission clearly weighing on him. When he opened the door, Alice felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Standing there, looking out of place in the bright morning light, was Randolph. The man who had once been Gerald's greatest adversary. The man who had brought untold chaos into their lives, only to find himself behind bars. Yet here he was, standing on their doorstep, an expression of strange sincerity on his face. Randolph? Alice's voice was steady but filled with disbelief. What are you doing here? Gerald stepped forward, his gaze hard and guarded. This better be good, Randolph. What do you want? Randolph, dressed in prison-issued clothes but with an air of authority about him, raised his hands in a placating gesture. I'm not here to cause trouble. I know you don't owe me anything, but I need to speak with you both. His tone was serious, tinged with a desperation that was unusual for someone like him. Alice exchanged a glance with Gerald, who was clearly unsettled but didn't voice his immediate concerns. He stepped aside, motioning for Randolph to enter. Once inside, Randolph took a seat at the small dining table, his posture straighter than she'd ever seen it before. There was no bravado, no arrogant smirk. Instead, there was an aura of weariness, like a man who had finally confronted the demons of his past and wasn't sure what to do with the aftermath. I've been thinking a lot since I've been in prison, Randolph began, his voice quieter than expected. I've seen things, learned things. Things that changed my perspective. He paused, as though the weight of his next words was too much to bear all at once. I've turned a new leaf. The man I was, the things I did to you both, those were mistakes. I can never undo them, but I'm not that man anymore. Alice watched him, her mind trying to process the transformation he seemed to be claiming. She had seen Randolph at his worst, manipulative, cold, dangerous, and the thought that he was now speaking of redemption felt almost laughable. But there was something in his eyes, something raw and vulnerable, that made her hesitate. Gerald, still standing near the door, crossed his arms. You're asking us to believe you've changed? After everything? Randolph nodded, his eyes not leaving Gerald's. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. Not yet. But I'm asking you to listen, to hear me out. There's still a threat. Selena's network isn't as finished as you think. There are pieces left, people who will continue her work if we don't stop them. Alice felt a chill creep up her spine. She had hoped that with Selena gone, the danger was over, but Randolph's warning struck a chord. It was impossible to know how much of this was genuine concern and how much was his own self-preservation, but there was no denying that his presence here now wasn't for personal gain, it was a warning. Gerald took a deep breath, his face hardening as he processed the information. So, what exactly are you saying? That we need your help? Randolph's gaze softened. Not help, per se. I'm in prison. I can't exactly do much from here. But I can give you intel, people who are still out there, still loyal to Selena. They won't stop unless we act first. They'll try to finish what she started, especially after what happened with you. Alice felt her heart race. The thought of more enemies, more threats, made her stomach tighten with anxiety. But she also knew that they couldn't ignore the possibility that Randolph was right. There were always more enemies lurking in the shadows. Why now? Gerald's voice was skeptical, but there was a trace of understanding behind it. Why come to us? After everything you've done? Randolph's eyes flickered with a mix of regret and resignation. Because I owe you both. I've done terrible things, and I can't change that. But I can at least try to make it right. I don't expect forgiveness, but I won't sit here in prison knowing that more people will be hurt because of what Selena left behind. There was a long silence in the room as Alice processed his words. She had never believed in the concept of redemption for someone like Randolph, but the gravity in his voice made her rethink everything. He wasn't asking for absolution, he was simply warning them of a danger that still lingered. And as much as she hated to admit it, they couldn't afford to ignore it. I'm not saying I forgive you, Alice said slowly, her voice firm but calm. But I'll listen. We'll listen. We owe it to the people who are still in danger. Randolph gave a single nod, his expression unreadable. That's all I can ask for. Gerald's gaze softened slightly, though the skepticism still lingered in his eyes. You'll be watched, Randolph. Don't think we're just trusting you because of some sob story. I understand, Randolph replied quietly. but this is the last chance I'll get. If you ever think I'm lying or trying to play you, don't hesitate to stop me. I'll disappear, and you'll never see me again." With those final words, he stood up, preparing to leave, but before he reached the door, he turned to Alice. "Thank you for considering my warning." And with that, he was gone. Alice and Gerald stood in the silence that followed, both contemplating the weight of what had just transpired. Randolph's words hung in the air, and though the threat of Selina's network still loomed, the sense of uncertainty was undeniable. Gerald turned to Alice, his eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. "We'll deal with this together. We always do." Alice nodded, her hand finding his. "We'll face whatever comes next together." The uneasy peace that had settled over their lives was now in jeopardy once more, but they knew that with each other, they would be ready. No matter the cost. A second chance. The city was a distant memory, its towering skyscrapers and ceaseless hum now fading in the rearview mirror of Gerald's old car. The familiar streets, once teeming with danger and secrets, were behind them as they drove deeper into the countryside. The air was fresher here, untainted by the endless noise and danger that had once been their reality. Alice leaned back in her seat, her fingers lightly tracing the fabric of her seatbelt as she gazed out the window at the sprawling green fields. For the first time in what felt like years, there was an overwhelming sense of peace, a peace that she could almost taste in the crisp air. But even here, amidst the beauty of the countryside, there was an underlying unease. It wasn't just the unfamiliarity of their new surroundings, nor was it the fear that they might still be haunted by the ghosts of their past. It was the weight of uncertainty, the question that hung between them: can they truly escape? Gerald's grip on the steering wheel tightened as the engine purred steadily beneath them. He kept his eyes fixed on the road, the deep furrow between his brows a sign of the internal battle he fought. Every mile they put between themselves and the city seemed to pull him further from his past, but the memories lingered like shadows in his mind, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. "Alice," he finally spoke, his voice low but filled with unspoken emotion. "Do you think we can really leave it all behind? Can we escape it, escape me?" She turned her head to him, her gaze gentle yet unwavering. She could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of the choices he had made and the sacrifices they had endured. But there was also something else there, something fragile and raw, as if he were searching for a reason to believe that they could have a future free of the chaos and bloodshed that had once defined his life. "Gerald," she whispered softly, her voice filled with a tenderness that only someone who truly understood his inner turmoil could offer. "You've carried the weight of your past for so long. But you're not alone anymore. We don't need to leave behind who we are to build something new. We just need to decide that we want it enough." The car hummed steadily along the winding road, and for a fleeting moment, everything felt right. Alice was here beside him, her presence a steadying force in the midst of all the uncertainty. She had always been his anchor, the person who had seen him for who he truly was beneath the layers of secrecy and danger. And now, with the world unfolding before them, he realized that maybe, just maybe, they could find peace not by running from the past, but by learning how to live with it, together. As they arrived at a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills, Gerald pulled the car into a modest driveway. The house before them was nothing spectacular, but to Gerald, it was perfect. It was a place where they could breathe, where they could rebuild. The door creaked open as they both stepped out, the cool air brushing against their skin as they surveyed their new home. "We can make this work," Alice said, stepping up beside him, her voice filled with a quiet conviction that only she could carry. "This is our chance. No more shadows, no more fear." Gerald looked at her, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. He wanted to believe it, he wanted to believe that this was truly the beginning of something new. But the reality of their situation wasn't that simple. He knew that his past, with all its blood and lies, wouldn't just disappear. It was a part of him now, just as much as the man standing next to Alice. But that didn't mean they couldn't start fresh, create a life where love was more than just a fleeting moment in a world of danger. "I'll try," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll try to be the man you deserve." Alice reached out, taking his hand gently in hers, her thumb running over the back of his hand in a comforting, steady rhythm. "You already are," she whispered back. You always have been." Together, they stood at the threshold of their new life, a life built on love and hope, knowing full well that the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, Gerald felt something inside him that he hadn't felt in years, a sense of possibility. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain: he didn't have to face it alone. The shadows of his past would always be there, lurking in the corners of his mind. But Alice had shown him that he didn't have to be defined by them. Their love had become the light that would guide them forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fields, Alice and Gerald stood side by side, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Together, they would write their own story, a story of second chances, of healing, and of love that could overcome even the darkest of pasts. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so uncertain after all. Shadows of redemption. The quiet life Alice and Gerald had longed for had finally begun. Nestled in a small town away from the chaos of their former lives, they slowly built their future, one peaceful day at a time. Their new home, surrounded by nature's embrace, became their sanctuary. The mornings were spent sipping coffee on the porch, watching the sun rise over the hills, while the afternoons were filled with moments of laughter, shared tasks, and quiet reflections. Gerald had come to appreciate these simple things he never thought he would experience, let alone cherish. He found peace in the mundane, in working the garden, helping Alice with repairs around the house, and enjoying her company without the shadow of danger hanging over them. It was a life he hadn't dared to dream of while entangled in his dangerous past. Alice, too, had found solace in their newfound peace. She worked as a teacher at the local school, nurturing young minds and quietly healing from the trauma she had endured. Every day she reminded herself that this life, this tranquility, was something worth protecting. The love they shared was her anchor, and it was with that love that she believed they could face anything that came their way. But peace, as they had both learned, was often a fragile thing. As the weeks passed, the sense of safety they had worked so hard to build began to feel like a thin veil, one that might easily be torn away. Gerald knew the danger was never truly gone. He had seen too much, been too deeply immersed in the world of secrets and lies, to believe in lasting security. His past was never too far behind, waiting in the shadows, ready to rear its ugly head. One evening, as Alice returned from the school, she found Gerald sitting quietly on the porch, staring out at the setting sun. There was an intensity in his eyes, a flicker of something unspoken that she recognized all too well. "Gerald?" Alice asked softly, stepping toward him. He turned to face her, his eyes momentarily distant before they focused on her. A quiet tension seemed to radiate from him, something Alice couldn't ignore. She had become adept at reading him over the years, and tonight, there was something different. "We can't outrun our past forever, Alice," Gerald said, his voice low, almost grim. "I thought this life was enough, but sometimes, I can feel it creeping up on us." Alice knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. "You don't have to face it alone anymore. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. We've built something good here, Gerald. Let's not let fear take that from us." Gerald's gaze softened as he squeezed her hand, but the weight of what he had said lingered. The peace they had found was only temporary, a brief reprieve before the storm. And somewhere, in the recesses of his mind, he knew that the storm wasn't far off. As the days passed, strange occurrences began to edge into their lives: anonymous messages, unsettling phone calls, and shadows in the corner of their eyes. They were subtle, fleeting, like the first whispers of something dark approaching. Alice tried to push them away, refusing to let fear infiltrate the life they had worked so hard to build. But Gerald was different. His instincts, honed through years of covert operations and constant danger, could not ignore the signs. One night, as they sat in their living room, the phone rang. Gerald's expression tightened as he answered it, listening intently to the voice on the other end. Alice watched him closely, noting the sudden shift in his demeanor. "It's happening again," Gerald muttered, hanging up the phone. He stood up and paced, the tension in his shoulders unmistakable. "Gerald, what's going on?" Alice asked, rising to her feet. He turned to face her, his eyes shadowed with the weight of everything that had been buried in his past. "I don't know exactly, but something's coming." "Someone's coming for us, Alice. And I don't think it's over." "Not yet." Alice's heart raced as she processed his words. Despite everything they had been through, despite the peace they had fought for, the world they had hoped to escape still had a hold on them. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut: they could never truly outrun the shadows of their past. Gerald took a deep breath, his gaze softening as he met her eyes. "But no matter what happens, Alice, I will never let anything happen to you. We'll fight this together, like we always have." Alice nodded, her heart heavy but resolute. Together. As the night stretched on, the weight of uncertainty hung between them, but so did something else: hope. They didn't know what lay ahead, what new adversaries or unresolved conflicts lurked in the shadows, but they knew one thing for certain: they would face it together. The future was still uncertain, and the shadows of their past would always be there, lurking at the edges of their lives. But as they stood side by side, their hearts aligned in quiet defiance of the darkness, they knew they were ready. And so, with the faintest trace of a smile on his lips and a resolute look in his eyes, Gerald took Alice's hand. The future was unwritten, full of both promise and peril, but it was theirs to face. Together. The story might not be over yet, but for now, they were ready for whatever came next.